I had 3 boxes left to check in my journal. I'd been counting down like a little kid waiting for Christmas. 1, 2, 3, and then freedom. Not just retirement. Not just a pension. Freedom. Safety. Finally, something that felt like peace after almost 3 decades of putting everyone else first. 29 years and 362 days. That's how long I'd worked for them. Showed up early, stayed late, never called in sick. I was the one they leaned on when deadlines got tight. I was the one who trained the new hires, stayed calm when things fell apart, and always said yes when they asked for more. I thought that mattered. I thought maybe loyalty still meant something. It was a Thursday morning. Regular. Staff meeting. I had my coffee in one hand, my notepad in the other. I was already planning my goodbye speech. Not the dramatic kind, just something simple, grateful, professional. I wanted to leave on a high note, then I got the email. Subject line: quick chat, your role. My stomach dropped a little. I don't know why. Just instinct, I guess. But I told myself it was nothing. Probably a final paperwork check-in. Maybe a farewell gesture from management. I walked into his office, and he didn't even look at me. That was the first sign. He just slid the paper across the desk. No explanation, no smile, no eye contact. "We're letting you go," he said. Effective immediately. I remember just staring at the paper, trying to understand the words. My ears were ringing. My face felt hot. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He kept talking. Something about restructuring, realignment, budget cuts. But it was all noise. It didn't matter. Nothing he said could explain what that paper meant. 3 days. 3 damn days from my full pension vesting. And just like that, it was gone. I walked out of that office with a cardboard box full of 30 years of my life. A mug my daughter gave me on my first promotion. A photo of the team from our 10-year anniversary. A little plant that somehow survived longer than my career. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel like I was holding onto the edge of a cliff. I remember whispering to myself, "This can't be real. This can't be happening." But it was. Nobody came out to say goodbye. Nobody called. Nobody checked in. It was like I'd vanished, like I'd never been there at all. The silence was worse than the betrayal. I kept replaying everything in my head. Every early morning. Every weekend I skipped with my family. Every time I'd said, "Don't worry, I've got it." All of it. Gone. I thought about the pension. Not just the money, but what it represented. Security. Gratitude. A promise. They made it seem like I mattered. And then they threw me away the moment it cost them something. 3 days. That's all I needed. 3 more days and I would have had something to show for it all. But instead, I was sitting in my car, watching the building I gave my life to shrink in my rearview mirror. And the worst part? I blamed myself. I kept wondering if I should have seen it coming, if I should have spoken up more, played office politics, documented everything. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't fire me because I failed. They fired me because I was too close to winning. And that's when something shifted in me, something quiet, something sharp. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't have a plan. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. Not after everything I gave them. Not after everything I'd survived. I was 23 when I first walked through those doors, fresh out of community college, clutching a GED and a resume with more hope than experience. I was a single mom, terrified and determined, and that job, it felt like a lifeline, not just a paycheck. a second chance. I started in the mailroom. No desk, no window, no one even knew my name for the first few months. But I showed up. Every morning, on time. I stayed late, said yes to everything, took pride in every small task. I believed that hard work spoke for itself. Over time, I moved up, slowly, quietly. From mailroom to receptionist, then admin assistant, then junior coordinator. I learned everything I could, even when no one offered to teach me. I watched, listened, figured it out. I was never the loudest in the room, never the one with the fancy degree or the slick confidence. But I was dependable. I got things done, and they started to notice. At least I thought they did. There was this one year, year 6, I think, when my daughter was sick for weeks. I had no family to lean on. I'd bring her to work sometimes, bundle her up in the break room with a coloring book, check on her between calls. Nobody said a word. I thought that meant they understood, that maybe they respected how hard I was, trying. But that was the first time I realized respect wasn't something they gave freely, not to people like me. Still, I kept going. I pushed down the feeling, buried it beneath productivity and politeness. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I missed my mother's funeral. My supervisor at the time had asked me to stay and cover a last-minute report. I told myself it was what my mom would have wanted, for me to be responsible, professional. I told myself a lot of things. I trained 5 different bosses over the years, each one younger than the last, some fresh out of college, some with barely a clue what they were doing. And I'd smile, offer help, cover their mistakes. Never once asked for credit. I didn't need a spotlight. I just wanted security. I mentored interns who now have director titles. I watched people climb the ladder while I held it steady for them. And when I was passed over, again and again, I told myself maybe next time. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. Maybe they just didn't see me clearly. But I kept showing up. There was one time, year 14, when I found a major error in a financial report. Quietly fixed it, flagged it to my manager. She thanked me. A week later, in a company-wide meeting, she took credit for catching it. Everyone applauded. I laughed, but it hurt inside. I let it go. I always let it go, because I thought if I stayed gracious, stayed reliable, stayed small, they'd eventually reward me. That someone would say, "You matter, you've earned this." There were red flags, sure. New leadership came in every few years. Colder eyes, less connection, policies that started to chip away at the benefits we once had. Bonuses got smaller. Over time, when unpaid, I saw people quietly disappear. Long-timers like me, just gone. But I ignored it, because I believed in loyalty. I believed that if you gave everything, you'd get something back. That's what I told my daughter. That's what I told myself. And then came year 25. I got a certificate, printed from a template. No speech, no celebration. Just a quick handshake and an email saying, "Thanks for your service." 25 years. I kept that email. I don't even know why. Maybe to remind myself that I wasn't invisible, that someone had at least typed out the words. The last few years, things shifted more. A new VP came in, the one who would eventually fire me. He was sharp, polished, efficient. He didn't learn names, didn't ask questions. He called me ma'am for the first 2 months like I was some old relic. I laughed it off, but I felt the chill. He started pushing for performance. Metrics, even on departments that didn't run on numbers. People got quiet in the break room. Nervous. There was more turnover than I'd ever seen. People got fired for reasons no one could explain. And still, I stayed. Because I was almost there. My pension, the one I'd been building since day one, was almost fully vested. I had 3 more years to go, then 2, then 1, and I told myself, just hold on. Just keep your head down. Just keep being the person they can count on. Don't rock the boat. Don't give them a reason to question your place here, because good people don't get discarded. Or so I thought. I was so sure that doing everything right meant I was safe. I never saw it coming. Not after all those years. Not after everything I gave them. But now, looking back, I see it clearly. They never cared who I was. They only cared what I could give. And the moment I cost them more than I saved, I became expendable. 3 days. That's what I kept whispering to myself in the silence that followed. 3 more days, and I would have been secure. Not rich, not reckless, just safe. I had done the math. I'd read every line of my pension agreement like it was scripture. I knew the vesting date down to the minute, and they knew it too. 2 weeks before it happened, my new boss, the polished one who called me ma'am like it was an insult, asked me to gather some records. Compliance review, he said. Casual, like it was no big deal, just part of a routine internal audit. I remember he even smiled when he said it. I smiled back. Naive. Still playing the part. I spent hours gathering everything, my role descriptions, performance reviews, team communications, timelines for project work. I was meticulous. I always was. I handed it over in a neat folder with my name printed on the front. He said, "Thanks. We appreciate your transparency." And I believed him. That folder, the one I built so carefully, became the weapon they used to gut me. I wasn't fired for misconduct. There was no write-up, no final warning, no performance concerns. My last annual review literally said I was an essential and irreplaceable team member, but suddenly, I was no longer aligned with the company's future direction. 3 days. 3 damn days. I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake, that if I could just talk to someone, explain the situation, someone, anyone, would step in and make it right. So I called HR. I poured my heart out. Calm at first, then desperate. I explained the timing. I pointed out the pension clause. I told them I'd worked nearly 3 decades without ever being written up. Do you know what they said? It's within policy. That's it. Like I was asking about a return at a department store. No emotion, no apology. Just, it's within policy. I don't even remember hanging up. I think I just sat there, staring at the wall, holding the phone like it might start ringing again and undo everything. But no one called. No one ever did. I waited. For a text from a coworker. For an email from the manager I'd trained 3 years ago. For a single acknowledgement that I was gone and that it wasn't okay. But silence became the answer. I don't know which was worse, the betrayal from management, or the erasure from everyone else. People I'd worked next to for decades suddenly acted like I'd never existed. No goodbye, no thinking of you, not even a LinkedIn message. That's what made it real. That's when the anger started to bloom beneath the grief. I kept replaying moments in my head. Every time I covered for someone. Every birthday card I bought for the break room. Every late night I stayed behind, making sure a report was perfect so the team wouldn't look bad. And for what? To be discarded like expired inventory? I went over everything. Every conversation. Every email. Trying to figure out how I missed the signs. That compliance request 2 weeks earlier. It wasn't random. It was a setup. They needed a paper trail. And I, like the fool I was trained to be, gave them everything they needed, neatly labeled and time-stamped. They didn't just fire me. They planned it. They used my own professionalism as ammunition. They let me think I was valued, right up to the moment I became expensive. And then they took everything I had built and pushed me out the door before it could cost them a penny more. And that severance? Don't even get me started. It was insulting. 3 months' pay, before taxes. No pension, no insurance, just a cold envelope and a line that said, "We wish you the best in your future endeavors." I read that line over and over, and I laughed. But it hurt inside. What future? I had planned everything around that pension. I had finally allowed myself to believe I could rest, that I could breathe. I was going to take a vacation, my first in years. I was going to help my daughter with her student loans. I was going to wake up and not check my inbox at 6 a.m. All of that was gone in one meeting and a single sheet of paper. But what they didn't know, what they still don't know, is that I kept everything. Not just the emails they asked for. Everything. Every message. Every policy update. Every time I flagged unethical behavior. Every compliment I ever got from a manager. Every time someone told me, "You should be running this place." I didn't know why I kept them at the time. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was hope. Maybe I was just clinging to proof that I mattered. But now I know better. That folder wasn't just paperwork. It was evidence. And someday, I was going to use it. I cried for 3 days. Not gentle tears. Not graceful ones. The kind where your chest aches and your throat burns, and you bury your face in a pillow because the sound of your own grief feels unbearable. I screamed like a teenager. I punched the mattress. I paced the hallway at night because sleep wouldn't come. It was like mourning a death. But on the 3rd day, something shifted. I got up, made a cup of coffee with shaking hands, and walked straight to the filing cabinet in the corner of my bedroom. I hadn't opened it in years. It was packed tight, papers, binders, old USB drives. But I knew what I was looking for. And when I found it, I didn't feel grief anymore. I felt power. Because while they had taken everything from me, my job, my pension, my dignity, they didn't know I had kept everything. Every email, every commendation, every team report. With my name at the bottom, and every discrepancy I had flagged over the years that mysteriously got brushed under the rug. I'd even made copies. Hard and digital. Not because I thought I'd need them, but because I was the kind of woman who kept receipts. Quietly. Carefully. Because somewhere inside me, even back then, I knew better than to trust blind loyalty. I stared at that pile of proof and thought, you're not that scared girl who walked in at 23. You're not invisible. You're not powerless. You're a woman with a history, with documentation, with a voice. And for the first time, I wanted to use it. I didn't act out of impulse. I sat down at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote a list, not just of names, but of what I knew, what I'd seen, what I could prove. Times when employees were quietly pushed out just before retirement. Bonuses delayed, then denied. Policy changes that favored upper management while cutting costs from the people who actually did the work. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was a pattern, a playbook. And I realized I wasn't the only one they'd done this to. I was just one of the few who still had her records. So I made some calls. The first was to an employment attorney I found online. I didn't even know what I was asking for. I just started talking. She let me ramble, then asked, "Do you have documentation?" I almost laughed. "You have no idea." We met a week later. I brought a box and 2 USBs. She read everything. And at one point, she looked up at me and said, "This isn't just a case, this is a story." That word stuck with me. Story. Because I had spent so many years keeping my head down, trying not to make waves. And now, here was someone telling me I had something people needed to hear. We worked quietly, carefully. She helped me file an official complaint with the Department of Labor. I wrote a detailed statement, attached copies, signed affidavits. I didn't go in with a trembling voice. I went in with facts. And then I reached out to a journalist. It took me weeks to get the courage, but I'd seen her cover workplace corruption before. I emailed her everything. Didn't expect to hear back. She responded the next day. She wanted to talk. And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. We spoke for 2 hours. I told her about the day I got fired, the pension, the silence that followed. I told her about the folder, the documentation, the pattern, and I told her, this isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. Because it wasn't just me. I'd found stories, online forums, social media posts, even Glassdoor reviews, from other employees who'd been let go under policy just before big payouts. Quietly, legally, systematically. I wasn't looking for sympathy anymore. I was looking for change. Somewhere along the way, the fear faded. The shame melted off. I stopped asking if I'd done something wrong and started asking how I could make it right. Not just for myself, but for every woman who'd ever been discarded when her loyalty got too expensive. I wasn't begging for a seat at the table anymore. I was building my own, and I wasn't alone. The journalist kept digging. The lawyer kept filing. More names came forward. More stories surfaced. The pattern was undeniable now, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Strong, not loud. Not dramatic, just strong. And this time, my voice wasn't shaking. The first call I made wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some Hollywood moment where I slammed my fist down and vowed revenge. It was quiet. I had a cup of tea next to me. My hand was steady. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Department of Labor. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just explained everything. Slowly, clearly. I gave dates, names, documents, patterns. And when I finished, the woman on the line was silent for a moment before she said, "Can you send all of this over right away?" That's when I knew something had shifted. I wasn't just a disgruntled former employee. I was someone who knew something. And the more I shared, the more they listened. After that, I called the Attorney General's office in my state. Same process, same evidence. They asked me questions, specific ones, about terminations, about timelines, about how pensions were calculated. By the end of the week, 2 separate investigations were opened. Within days, they reached out to others, former employees, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some of them had never said anything out loud. They thought they were the only ones. They weren't. It was a pattern, a deliberate, systematic strategy to fire long-term employees right before major benefits kicked in. Every case was just under the threshold. Every justification just vague enough to be legal on paper but rotten underneath. And for once, someone was finally pulling back the curtain. My attorney stayed in close contact with both offices. She told me, "You did more than report a wrong. You exposed a practice." It felt surreal, like I'd been whispering into a void for years, and suddenly the whole world was turning to listen. The media got involved next. The journalist I'd spoken with published a story, not just about me, but about them, about what they'd been doing. She quoted parts of my statement, used some of my old emails, even referenced the pension clause in their own employee manual. It went viral. Not Kardashian viral. Not clickbait viral. But in the world of corporate, HR, and workplace ethics, it exploded. Forums lit up. Employees from other branches, even other companies, started commenting, "This happened to me too." And just like that, they weren't in control of the narrative anymore. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because the people who used to talk over me were suddenly scrambling to explain themselves. The company issued a formal response. It was full of legal speak and damage control. They claimed they had followed internal procedures and acted in accordance with company values. But behind the scenes, they were unraveling. An internal audit was launched. The board demanded answers. My former boss, the one who had slid that paper across the desk and refused to look me in the eye, was suddenly on indefinite leave. A month later, he was quietly removed. No fanfare, no goodbye, just gone. And me? I got a call from the company's legal department. They wanted to resolve the matter. Suddenly, my pension wasn't so impossible to access. In fact, they offered to reinstate it with interest. I remember sitting there, holding the phone, listening to the same people who once tossed me aside now begging for settlement terms. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about dignity. I said yes, but on my terms. I wanted a formal letter acknowledging wrongful termination. I wanted my benefits backdated. I wanted my record cleared. And I wanted a public apology. They hesitated. I didn't. I said, "You can either fix this now, or I can keep talking." They fixed it. The letter came first, cold but official. Then the pension, full and untouched. Then the apology, buried in a press release, but it was there. My name included. Their mistake acknowledged. I printed it out and pinned it to my corkboard. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That silence isn't always strength. That loyalty doesn't mean self-sacrifice. And that sometimes, one quiet woman with the truth is more powerful than a dozen men in suits with lies. Word spread. Friends who hadn't spoken to me in years reached out. People from the company, even those who hadn't stood up for me, messaged to say, "You were right. I'm sorry I didn't say anything back then." And for once, it didn't sting. Because I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I had found something deeper. Self-respect. It's a strange thing, rising from something like this. You don't come back the same. You don't want the same things. You don't crave recognition or revenge. You crave truth, peace, freedom. Not the kind they sell you in retirement brochures. The kind you earn when you finally stop begging for someone else to do right by you. And you do right by yourself instead. I used to think power looked like a corner office and a title. Now I know better. Power is a woman with receipts and a backbone. Power is knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone write you out of your own story, and it all started with one phone call. I still wake up at 6 a.m. Some habits are hard to break, I guess. For nearly 30 years, that alarm ruled my life. Even now, with no office to clock into, no deadlines hanging over me, my body just remembers. But it's different now. Now I don't jump out of bed in a panic. I don't check my phone before my eyes are even fully open. I don't rehearse emails in my head while brushing my teeth. Now I make coffee slowly. I sit on my porch. I watch the sun rise and let the silence settle around me like a soft blanket. And for the first time in decades, I feel at peace. It took a long time to get here. Longer than I'd like to admit. Even after everything, the lawsuit, the investigation, the apology, I still carried the weight. Not just of what they did to me, but of what I let myself believe for so long. I thought loyalty meant sacrifice. I thought being the last to leave and the first to volunteer somehow made me safe. I thought if I was useful enough, kind enough, patient enough, they wouldn't let me go. But the truth is, loyalty without boundaries isn't noble. It's self-abandonment. And I had been abandoning myself for years. That's what really broke me. Not the termination, not even losing the pension. It was realizing how much of myself I had given up in the name of being a good employee. How many birthdays I missed. How many nights I fell asleep with my laptop open. How many times I bit my tongue when someone took credit for my work. because I didn't want to make things awkward. I told myself it was temporary, that it would pay off one day. But time doesn't give refunds. What I've learned, what I'm still learning, is that the real reward isn't a pension or a plaque. It's your peace, your self-worth, your voice. I used to think being quiet made me strong, that swallowing my frustration was maturity, that letting things slide was professionalism. But now I know. Silence isn't strength when it comes from fear. And what I did in the end wasn't about revenge. It was about finally standing up for the woman I used to ignore. The one inside me who whispered, "This isn't right. You deserve more." I didn't just fight for my pension. I fought for her. And I fought for every woman who's ever been made to feel like she's replaceable. Like her decades of dedication could be erased with a single meeting and a severance envelope. We are not disposable. We are not invisible. We are not interchangeable cogs in someone else's profit machine. And we are not powerless. I know it doesn't always feel that way. I know some of you listening might still be stuck, still scared, still convincing yourself that things will get better if you just hang on a little longer. But please hear me when I say this. You don't have to burn yourself out to prove your worth. You don't have to stay silent to be respected, and you don't have to wait until someone else gives you permission to speak up. You already have that power. You always did. I look back now, and I wish I had found my voice sooner. I wish I had trusted my instincts more. I wish I hadn't spent so many years apologizing for taking up space. But regret doesn't live here anymore. I've replaced it with grace. I've replaced it with rest. I've replaced it with mornings where I sit quietly and listen to my own thoughts. Not the noise of an overworked mind, but the steady, quiet knowing of a woman who's come home to herself. People ask me what I'm doing now. The truth? I'm healing, I'm resting, I'm learning how to enjoy things again. Baking without a deadline, reading a book without feeling like I should be somewhere else, saying no without guilt. I even started journaling again. Not a to-do list or a checklist, just feelings, thoughts, little victories. Like the first time I laughed and didn't feel a lump in my throat. Like the first time I looked in the mirror and saw someone whole, not broken. Like the first time I told my story out loud and realized, it's not just mine, it's ours. Because betrayal isn't rare. Unfortunately, it's far too common. But healing, reclaiming your voice, learning to live on your own terms again, that's the part more women need to hear. So if you're listening to this and you feel like your story doesn't matter, it does. If you think it's too late to start over, it's not. And if you believe you're too tired, too worn down, too used up to fight for yourself, please know you are not. You are still here, still breathing, still worthy. And there is so much waiting for you on the other side of this pain. I still wake up at 6 a.m., but now I smile when I do. Because I know I don't have to run anymore. I'm already free. If this story touched you, if you saw even a small part of yourself in it, I'd love for you to like this video, not just for me, but for every woman who's ever been silenced or cast aside. Subscribe if you want more real, raw stories that remind you you're not alone. We talk about healing, justice, betrayal, and the strength it takes to rise again. Share this with a friend, a sister, a mother, someone who needs to know it's never too late to take your power back. And please, comment generously. Tell me your story. Tell me what part hit home. I read every word, and I promise, this is a space where your voice matters. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to heal. Let's rise together.